L'Jarius Sneed is not going to play on this tag. That's only one of three options, and it isn't going to happen. I'm going to tell you what is. Coming up next on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. Nice to see everyone in. It is a Friday, and we are brought to you, therefore, by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers are getting $200 back on a $5 winning bet. Super simple. $200 bet if your bet wins at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get in the action over there. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, where you get the athletic matrix. NFL33.com, where you can get all the league-wide breakdown of the draft cycle, etc., and RGR Football, where you can see all kinds of more in-depth analysis on the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to have a great show for you today. I am running solo, so that means you're getting me 100% both barrels. We're going to go over rumors that do and don't make sense coming up later in the show. What are the staying power for L'Jarius Sneed? Should he stay in Kansas City? A distinct possibility. What does that look like? And we're going to get started right off the bat with the trade scenarios, because it's been quiet this week. We've been kind of prepared for most of it, in that we could see a trade happen at any time. But we've kind of gone with the flow, and the flow has not happened at all. So here on Locked On Podcast Network, that's your team every single day. Make sure you like and sub and hit the bell here on YouTube, because that's where we start. And then we go to the audio platforms. So you can sub over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as any audio platform you like, because we're free and available every single day on every single platform, and then some. The concept here, whether we do this now or if something does happen here in the near future, L'Jarius Sneed will get a bonus episode dropped from us in breaking it down. The scenarios are kind of rampant. A lot of teams were in early. It's settled down now. A great piece out on The Athletic from our friend Nate Taylor came out as well, kind of just checking off the boxes of the things that we had understood. And it really comes down to this. There are three options. Two we'll talk about if L'Jarius Sneed stays on the Chiefs roster. But the first one, and probably the one that's at the tipping point right now, is probably the trade, for a couple of reasons. For L'Jarius Sneed, a trade out of Kansas City, having won championships now and accomplished what is a lot of career goals for most NFL players, sets him up to now go take care of business for the rest of him, his family, and his post-football career. That's not going to come from Kansas City, and he knows that. I'm sure discussions have been had to the point that all the representatives are aware of just what is and isn't possible in Kansas City. And getting a $20 million plus, or even anything close to it, is just not in the cards. So for him and his reps, the impetus is to go find someone who is willing to foot that bill, to pay out 3 to 4 years at $20 million average, and give you a chance to send not just yourself up, but your kids, your family at large, up for the rest of their lives as well. That's probably the number one goal. You've seen some clips with L'Jarius talking on various shows and at various events around town about it's about getting paid. Would he love to stay with the Chiefs? It clearly seems like that would be the case, but he understands that that's not where he's going to make the most bang for his buck right now, which after this season is at the top of what it's ever going to be. He's never going to have more value to an NFL franchise than he does right now. Even if he were to sign, say, a 2-year extension in Kansas City and have back-to-back All-Pros. He'll be 29 years old at that point. So he will not have the value for any other franchise beyond that. This is it. This is the top of his earning potential. And for him and his representatives, he has to make the most of it. That's clear and understandable, and you can't hold that against him. I certainly don't. I think the other thing that we have to remember is that it's an ongoing process. Not one thing is done until it's done. And back and forth, I think that's highlighted most especially by what we hear now, in that there were a number of teams that were in, several have fallen out, several have made other moves at the position, making trades, making acquisitions at cornerback, which would then rule out paying the kind of contract that L'Jarius Sneed wants to have. And this is part of the process. This happened previously with Dee Ford. The whole concept of tag and then negotiate is generally negotiating with another team so that they understand what the base is, and they can maybe make more of an investment forward than the current team can. That seems to be the situation here. So what it comes down to at this point, with teams having moved on and made other arrangements, is for a trade, it comes down to basically two teams. And unfortunately, they're both in the AFC, which I don't like that concept at all, but what can you do? You got to have two to tango, and that's who's ready to tango. And they're not 100% ready. It has to be a team that can afford to put the investment in and be able to pay long-term the contract that L'Jarius wants. And I'm sure that there's negotiations there. So far, as we understand, the hang-up has been the contract cost. Now, that comes down. It's going to continue to come down. In fact, I don't think this gets done until within 10 days of the NFL draft, maybe not until draft night or even day 2 of the draft. It's going to be one of those situations that it's got to be a team coming up against a wall that they can't get through in order to make them pull the trigger here. Maybe they're going to have to spend a little more than they want. Maybe the Chiefs are going to have to take a little bit less in compensation that they want. But that's scenario number one, is that they get the trade done. There are two players at this point, as I understand, on Friday afternoon in March, the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the difference is Titans have a whole lot more money. So in being able to provide L'Jarius with the contract that he's looking for, that is the more logical and probable outcome. The compensation would then be the question. The Colts have draft picks, 2 second-rounders that they could be looking for, and that's attractive to the team. Somewhere in the middle, something's got to get done. In order to get this done, they'll have to have a compensation package of a new contract in store and outlined, and then they'll have to work on the compensation to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, if they can't get a top 75 pick, honestly, if it were me, if I can't get a top 65 pick, meaning a second-rounder, I would not be trading L'Jarius Sneed. I would roll with this franchise tag at this point and work on a secondary contract. We're going to talk about that here in a second and see what you can do. But that's in desperation if the trade can't happen. There's 2 options there. We're going to get to those coming up right after this here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, this show is brought to you by BetterHelp, and that's something that we need encouragement from. I need encouragement to think that this trade is going to happen. I need encouragement to think that we're going to get through the offseason and have everything that we're looking for. And sometimes that's what you need. You need a little bit more time to spend on these concepts. And if time is your issue, the question is, what would you use it if you had more time? Well, I would be doing more research. I'd be watching more film. What would you be doing? Therapy can help you cut out some of the focus stealing aspects of your life and get down to business and get tuned in on what you want to get done a little bit more straightforwardly. If you're thinking of starting therapy right now, give BetterHelp a try. They're entirely online. They're designed to be convenient and suited to your schedule and adaptable as well, so that you can move things around. You'll just fill out a brief questionnaire online and get matched with a licensed therapist. You'll try that out. You'll see how that goes. If you want to switch therapists at any time, you can do that at no additional charge. You can learn what makes you happy and learn to have the time for it with BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You go there and you get 10% off on your first month today. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. You also want to check out the LockOn Sports Today feed. It is 24/7 and is coming at you live. I think you guys will absolutely adore that. It is something that will give you the information that you're looking for on a daily basis and get you all the way through what you're trying to get information on, whether it's this NFL draft, whether it's March Madness, a lot there. You're going to also see some specials coming from us as well. So don't miss the mock draft here on the network of all the team representatives and hosts. That's going to be fun, and I think you guys are going to like the outcome. Outcomes are what we're talking about with L'Jarius Sneed, and if he stays, there are 2 options here. Both a little bit more powerful in terms of who has the upper hand. Clearly for the Kansas City Chiefs, in order to get other pieces onto the roster and moving forward, they want to have the room in cap space. That means if L'Jarius Sneed stays and they're unable to work out a deal for first the compensation, but then the trade value, the Chiefs need to get to work on an extension, however small. I think the Chiefs are going to want 2 years. I think L'Jarius wants 4. Maybe they can meet in the middle of 3, and there's some creativeness there that allows him to get back to the free agent market. That could be there. A 2-year and a cut point. That's kind of the scenario. The question becomes what the compensation is. And for the Chiefs, anything they can do to reduce that franchise tag number helps. But I think there is a hard ceiling to what they want to spend. And that's going to be the come to conclusion aspect for L'Jarius Sneed of whether he actually recognizes that they can get done or not. In my mind, I think the Chiefs number is somewhere down around 16, 17 a year max, because that's a lot of eggs in that basket, especially for a guy who had to miss camp last year. I think there's injury concern. I think that's probably what's holding up some of the trade scenarios as well. Not just the money, but the money for a guy that has had some injuries in the past. And I think the physical is going to be a determining factor there as we get closer to draft weekend, where I think negotiations will heat back up on the trade. But in the meantime, the Chiefs have to prepare for this contract extension because that's what they'll want to do. Now, for L'Jarius, he's going to be happy making $19 million. Would he like to have a long-term contract and be able to project more? Sure. But to function on the tag, he can get that done. It allows him to go back, take another shot at trying to get another championship, and play in a system that allows him the freedom to be who he is and maximize his earning potential yet again with another outstanding season performance, because it's exactly fitted to what he wants to do, what he's capable of doing, and how he performs best. So that's a huge positive for him. But overall, I think the best scenario for L'Jarius Sneed is to try to come off of his number a bit and work on the trade so that he can get somewhere else that allows the longevity of the contract that he's looking for. Staying in Kansas City is a great option, certainly for the Chiefs, because you'd love to have a player of his caliber on the line for a three-peat run. You also need to make sure that you shore up the offense and continue to improve that side of the ball as well, so the cap space becomes important at that point, nearly just as much. Those two options run hand in hand and down the same path, but end in different circumstances. And it all circles back to what everything goes in, having a top flight corner be available. They've done everything, I think, in this point in Kansas City for the leadership to accomplish their goal of either having the player on the roster or getting the compensation that allows them to let everybody else move up. If L'Jarius Sneed does get traded, I expect a couple of things. With the Colts, it's going to be a minimum of a second-round pick. If you don't get the second-round pick, you can come back. They have, I think it's 82. They have a mid-third. That's not enough for me, so it would have to be a third and a fourth combination thereof, that kind of thing. I don't know. There's players that they want to move on from, and I don't know that the Chiefs would be interested in that. But if you get to that point, you have to look at what happens next, and that is that Trent McDuffie moves from nickel to the outside. I don't think you're going to be comfortable with having both Jalen Watson on one side and Joshua Williams on the other as your starting corners to play 80+% of the snaps every week all season long. I don't think that's going to hold up. I think both those players are still on the rise, but I don't think they're there yet. So I think the idea is that you have to move McDuffie to the outside corner on one side. They will continue to split the outside corner duties on the other side. And then you have multiple options inside. Mike Edwards' departure makes it harder to see Chamari Connor going into the nickel as a full-time player. He can certainly do it in spot duty, but it makes you see that he should be the third safety pretty consistently. Now, if they'd been able to bring back Mike Edwards, that would have changed that scenario completely. But they're not bereft of options because they do have both Najee Johnson coming back off of injury. They have Nick Jones as well, and they have options in the draft. There are a lot of slot corners in the draft that they could go acquire. So if the Chiefs aren't able to get a trade done, they'll have an additional pick. They'll be able to attempt to make some moves up in the first round, in my opinion, to go after a player that they really need. And they will have the depth to then try to secure another slot type inside corner that they can mature and throw into the mix with Nick Jones and Najee Johnson and see who comes out on top to be that player that's on the field with Trent McDuffie, Jalen, and Josh. I think that makes perfect sense, and I think that's something that they could live with and might even be the priority for them at this moment. But that's not the only thing that they have to get done. There are other positions that they have to shore up, and the two big ones have a bunch of rumors swirling around them right now. We're going to get to those ones that I just don't think are going to come to fruition, and why that is coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game in this tournament whenever you want. Whether you're betting on an upset or the one seed, it's time to go dancing with America's #1 sportsbook and that is FanDuel. Right now, new customers are getting $200 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins on FanDuel, it's $200 back using point spreads, money lines, whatever you're looking for. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Visit us at FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet your college hoops until they cut down the nets right now on FanDuel. Rumors are always a fun time, and another fun time is checking out the Locked On Sports Today feed. It's 24/7. You can get your sports fix whenever you need it. Rumors run rampant this time of year, and there are a couple that I need to address as I get a lot of questions about them. And with Chris not here, Chris generally will talk some sense into me if I start to get to a little bit too far down the rumor mill. But there are two that stand out right now that I think we really need to address because of the situation with L'Jarius Sneed and the cap space that is involved. The Chiefs are sitting right about $7.6 million in cap space as of today, as I have checked the sites. It's always a little bit volatile, so it's plus or minus, call it something like that. It doesn't give them a lot of room to maneuver. You generally are going to need about 6 to sign your draft class, so that's already pre-spent, pre-allocated. You know that it's coming. What you have to then do is find a way to either create some space or understand that it's got to be all investment in that draft class in order to fix your problems. Right now, the whole scenario that we've talked about today with L'Jarius Sneed is about that option. I don't think they're ready to spend the 7 now because they then have to create more space after the draft in order to get that class signed. That is a possibility. They could go ahead and make a couple of moves as long as they stay under the cap now, and then work to restructure someone else, add something back, or even a possible later trade of L'Jarius Sneed that would alleviate that space. So what could they do? The two most popular ideas that I have seen recently involve a wide receiver and an offensive lineman, both of which are interesting prospects, but I think are going in different directions. The first that I want to address is Odell Beckham Jr., who apparently has expressed some interest in coming to Kansas City. We know that there was interest because they inquired about him last season before he ended up in Baltimore. And I think that is a possibility here as free agency goes on. It's going to have to be a late acquisition because I don't think you're in the realm to be paying MVS type money to Odell Beckham Jr. It's going to have to be an incentive-based contract that starts pretty low at the $6 million mark or something like that. That's my gut reaction. But you know you're going to make an investment in wide receiver in the draft. That takes a little bit of time. Even for Rashee Rice, it took some time to get going, to get into the offense. So you would then look at having Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and OBJ out there. Now, OBJ, I'm not sure that he can be a down-to-down full game participant every week, but he certainly can give you some of that action. What happens next is how much is that payoff? That's the big question. I think if the contract can be reached, I think it's worth bringing him in. I don't know he can be a full-time player, but you also have Justin Watson on the roster. Obviously, you have Sky Moore, you have Kadarius Toney. You could supplement some reps there with some rotations. And I think it also allows you to bring along another draft pick with even more experience and more tutorship in the room. The question is going to be is what's the attitude? This is a 31-year-old player who has won a championship in Los Angeles, who is coming back around for another ring run. But is it something that adds to the room and adds to the roster, or is it something that distracts from it? That's going to be the bottom line. I think it's worth pursuing to see what the connection is there. And we won't know until we know, but I think that's something they can look at. One thing that I would not look at is the concept that I keep hearing questions on about Mekhi Becton, the offensive tackle of the New York Jets fame, coming to Kansas City to man that position for the Chiefs. I do not see that happening. Becton's injury history alone prohibits any kind of a spend on him as a Donovan Smith type player, as we saw last season, because you just don't know how much you're going to get out of him. And you have to be able to have that run from Thanksgiving on and be confident that you're going to have the player available. I just can't say that about Mekhi Becton, and nobody else can either. So I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. It would be money down the drain as far as I'm concerned. And I do think the Chiefs will make a selection in this draft to give some competition to Wanya Morris. I also think there's a possibility that they bring back Donovan Smith. They like what he did in the locker room. There is a culture fit there that I think he's part of one winning team already, and I think he'd like to do that again. I think there's mutual interest there, not necessarily as a starter, but as a guy that's in the mix, and certainly if Donovan Smith is your swing tackle, I think you can feel pretty good about it. That would require Wanya Morris beating him out and beating out a possible high draft selection at the position as well. That is what I expect to happen, and I think that that's going to work out just fine. It all hinges back on the L'Jarius Sneed trade, of course, in order to get some of that done. If that doesn't happen, then I think it's Wanya Morris and a draft pick that will battle it out for that left tackle spot. I'd like to know what other rumors you're looking at. Leave your comments down below here on YouTube, like, sub, and hit the bell there. And get subbed over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I very much appreciate it. Chris is going to be back. We're going to have Mock Draft Monday coming up so that we can get you all the scenarios as we work through this whole offseason. The next version is coming up. Please be with us. Then we will try to do it live. If not, we'll have it for you late Sunday night, as the Monday show always comes out the night before. And we can also give you any late breaking news, L'Jarius or otherwise, on our text line for the insiders at 816-357-8781. Get connected there. We appreciate you spending your time with us. Hope that you have a great weekend. Enjoy everything that's going to go on in the March Madness bracket, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. I hope that you guys won't hold that part against me, but enjoy your weekend. We'll be back with you for a mock draft coming this Sunday